people think of mathematical reasoning as one of the things that makes us really special. You know, non-human species will never be anywhere close to us. Like math, no. But there are aspects of mathematical thought that non-human primates share with us. It is extremely useful during foraging to maximize the amount of food that they could possibly get per unit time. They're also tracking how many alliances does one individual in their group have and how many animals are moving in one direction versus another. You know, whether you want to engage in a fight or flight with a predator group. Being able to make calculations about your direction of travel around your home turf or the shape of their environment. It turns out that non-human primates are pretty good at ballparking those things without getting out the ruler. I'm Jessica Cantlin, and I study the evolution of human mathematical thought. In our research, we've focused on the capacity to think about numbers, arithmetic operations, and geometric thought. Figuring out what are the computational abilities of non-human primates, what kinds of problems can they solve that they weren't born to solve, right? That might not have an innate basis, and what makes human mathematics really unique. One of the most profound things that we've found is that when we look at the brains of 3- and 4-year-old children, we see the same exact brain region in order to represent numerical values as the brains of non-human primates. We think that those patterns are an evolutionary template that we share with non-human primates. But we also want to track down if a non-human primate had as much experience over time as a human child, might they turn out with the same concepts? And what are the similarities and differences in our learning processes? We create mathematical tasks that are presented non-verbally that very young children can answer by touch. We then give the same kinds of tasks with non-human primates. And we can ask how similar or different are the behaviors of these two groups. I think maybe 10 years. We worked in the back of the Seneca Park Zoo, off exhibit, trial after trial, hundreds of times a day, and that limits the amount of data we get. So Carolyn DeLong and I conceived of this idea together.
We wanted to see if we can run the studies all day, every day, without keepers to come in and let us in to test an animal.
So that was the inspiration for the Primate Portal. We built a public lab on the outside, and then my team went to work wiring it up. So the touchscreen connected to the computer determines whether or not the monkey's answers were right. And every time the monkey is right, the robotic feeder delivers a fruit crunchy pellet with vitamins in it. So we're recording the speed of their touch, their faces, where they're looking, and we can track patterns of performance over time.
We can get thousands of data points per day, a lot more data than we would if we had to use keepers to come in and help us set up.
Baboons can participate whenever they want, and having that helps them burn off the intellectual energy that they have that they might otherwise use to sort of make social trouble. When we first started, we would show 2 choices for what do they think is the best match, but they won't be the exact same thing as the samples. We try to kind of see if the baboons can really use the numerical value of the stimulus to make those matches. And what we find is that some things that start out pretty difficult actually end up becoming quite easy. We've also focused on geometric thinking, where they see a triangle at the top and they have to pick the shape that matches. And we'll make the choices change the number of sides, the length of those sides, and the apertures of their angles. One of the things that we're finding so far is that, yes, non-human primates can think about the features of geometric objects. They can reason about the number of sides separately from the length of the sides. But when you ask them about the size of that angle compared to another one, it's hard for them to just compare that feature in another object. What we think is difficult about representing angle is you have to calculate it based on the relationship between 2 things in order to represent that feature. And that's interesting because sensitivity to angles is the last thing to develop in children. In our research, we've tracked how formal schooling, this cultural takeover, sharpens this ability to package their representation symbolically. So what starts out as an evolutionarily universal neural pattern of development for mathematics becomes this really precise system that makes human mathematics really unique. Setting up, kind of an automated primate portal opened up a lot of opportunity for engaging people in the research that we were doing. So we are working with students in public schools so that they can create a game that we then give to the baboons.
When the kids get to the Primate Portal for their field trip and they see their games come up on the monitor, there's a sense of real excitement about having been a part of actual scientific research.
We made this animal. We made this animal.
Not only are we making them more excited about science, we wanted to see if 3rd to 6th grade students would increase their computational thinking skills after participating in the Kids Coding Project. And what we found is that all the kids had scores that went up and increased interest in science in such a short time.
It's hard for kids to appreciate it as a tool that you might use to ask animals interesting questions. But in the real world, biologists use coding and they use math, and people who are engineers or mathematicians have to understand things about the natural world.
We're also educating zoo guests about how research works in animal cognition.
So we have visitors coming through and they see a baboon working on a problem, and you can actually hear audible gasps. To find a connection with a non-human species in a domain that's so central to how you define yourself, those moments are really precious because it impresses on you that there's a rich cognitive world inside these primates.